100 episodes of Shark Watch.
Yep.
Pretty big milestone.
Yeah, it's huge. It took ages to obviously get to this point. I think we started it, would have been 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And the goal we set out initially was 100,000 subscribers, which is obviously a heap of people. So I think we're at about like 100 or something now. Got ages to go. But it's good to set those big sort of milestones, I think, and it keeps us on track to try to work towards something big. But yeah, 100 episodes is a good milestone. It's obviously taken a lot of time and effort, and with vlogs as well, there's like a lot of editing that goes into it behind the scenes, and it's obviously like for every like minute of usable footage, you're using a lot of time to obviously create the episode as well. So I mean, it's a lot of work, but I think it's cool to document a lot of the stuff, because like when I came up through martial arts, one thing that I really regret is I didn't have a lot of photos and video of me coming up through my journey. Not until really I met you and you started filming a lot of my comps and stuff, you know. But then I sort of think from the Matt Shark perspective, from all those people in our community now, when they work their way through and become like black belts one day, they're going to have like their whole journey recorded to some extent, and the history of their club sort of documented to kind of go back through, which I thought would be pretty cool. So that was like the idea behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon that's going to be pretty powerful for people, part of the community, to go back and have a look at like when they first, you know, came into the Matt Shark community itself, and then obviously going back past that to sort of see a little bit of the history there too. I think you sent me a photo the other day of like a whole bunch of people that had been there, and you're like, oh wow, yeah, I forgot they were here. Like, it wasn't even that long ago. Maybe it was like a year ago or so.
2 years, man.
Was it 2 years? Yeah, okay. And you're like, oh man, like a couple of these people have moved. You know, some of them moved over east, some of them moved out of the country, changed gyms, stuff like that. So you forget about all that sort of stuff and that history there. Like doing different comps and stuff, traveling to different comps, different seminars with these people. So yeah, it's pretty cool to kind of look back on the history and actually have like a like digital version of a whole bunch of memories and stuff you've made with all these people. Hey,
my memory's shit ass. Like most people I think can't like actually recall things that well, you know. So I think like having that video, you watch it and you go through things and you remember like, oh, that happened and this happened and that happened, and you actually kind of get the experience of like being there and reliving it, which is kind of cool. So I've always kind of liked the idea of documentary style things. I think the vlog format's really good for like this sort of thing. And then like I think back to some of the episodes, like the episode where we went to Melbourne with the Matt Shark team. You know, there's a bunch of us there. Like, you know, we had like a bunch of Team Armour guys, and we had like Big Liam and obviously Kev and like a bunch of different people there as well. You know, like so I think that sort of thing. You know, like you forget little things that happened, and you know, you forget little things that maybe Rochi said something, or so-and-so did something, and like you forget these little things. You watch the video and it prompts all these thoughts and memories, and you remember like what it's kind of like to be there, and it really does capture it, different to like obviously your memory where you remember select things that happen, but really you don't really have that good recollection of what went down. But the video really helps to prompt like the things around the trip and just sort of relive it, you know. And I think having that on film is just a cool thing. For as time goes on, it gets like more and more important to be able to look at that stuff and relive it. And like even from a training perspective, a lot of people, they forget like how terrible they were too, and like
I don't.
They can jump on there and see like what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like they'll be doing like a pendulum sleep and it's like terrible, and then they're like a year or 2 years down the track and they can see like, oh, actually I am getting better. I do know some stuff now. You know, people always feel stagnant. It's not one comment I get as a coach. It's just like, I'm not getting any better. What do I have to do? And like the reality is they are getting a lot better, but they just can't tell. If they saw themselves like a year or 2 years ago, they would be like, what the hell am I doing? You know what I mean? So yeah, it's kind of cool for that aspect as well. So I guess yeah, 100 episodes of that is pretty, when you think about it, it's a lot, you know. So I mean, it's a good milestone. Obviously, much more to come. But you think about it, 100 episodes in, what do we say, 3 years?
Yeah, I reckon we would have started back in September 2017, which was when we first moved into TBC, which is where obviously we're running Matt Shark out of now.
Yep.
So we would have started somewhere around there, I think.
Yeah, it's not a bad rate to get that many out then. That's
like, it's pretty good, man. It's coming up for like what? It's more like 3.5 years, pretty close to 4 years now.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's cool. 100 episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that as well. I think looking back at your old comp footage and stuff is pretty important. Like, it's pretty hard to do, to be honest. I'm one of those people that are like, oh my god, it's so crap. Like, what are you doing? Like, get annoyed at yourself, but it is super good. It's real powerful because you can kind of see like, oh well, yeah, I don't make that mistake anymore, or oh yeah, I did fix up that hole in my game that I could see when I was versing someone like 12 months ago or whatever. So yeah, I think that's also a really good point you brought up there, is to kind of look back and see your progress, because it's pretty hard to see in the moment and like in the day-to-day grind of things. I reckon like people that rock up to training, like 2, 3, 4 times a week, and they encounter the same problems and they're versing the same people pretty regularly and stuff. Like, it's pretty hard to see your individual progression. So being able to look back at your competition footage and sort of see like, oh yeah, cool, like I have actually made a couple of gains here or there or whatever. It's like pretty cool, I reckon.
But like, these people that are coming through now, they're going to be able to have like every match they've ever had on film, and that's a super powerful development tool. You know what I mean? People's game change a lot when they go from like blue to purple, and then again a lot when they go from brown to black, sort of in those two pockets, I find anyway, typically, because at the start they're sort of blue belt, you find 1 or 2 things that work really well, you just kind of keep doing them, but then sort of around purple you end up finding yourself getting forced into other people's games a lot. So then you have to actually learn how to deal with different games, and then from there you usually find some things that work well for you, and then you start building your game, and then you find your little A game that works really well. But then by the time you go from like brown to black, guys are so good at dealing with so much stuff, you almost have to have like a few different games you can play to be effective, and part of developing that is just like being self-aware and being able to work on the little intricacies of each technique, and video is a real powerful tool for that.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at each belt level, what advice would you give to a white belt versus a blue belt versus a purple belt versus a brown belt, and then obviously again versus a black belt?
Advice?
Yeah, so like, for example, what should a white belt be focusing on from like within their, like white to blue sort of state, and then what should a blue belt be focusing on, and then what should a purple belt be focusing on? Like, what's the sort of things in between all of that I guess link that together over a 10, 12-year journey to black belt, and then obviously from black belt there's more stuff you probably learn as well.
Yeah, I don't know, I said white belt, like very fresh white belts, probably just defense, like being fundamentally aware of like not turning your back and getting choked, and the fact that someone's going to try to bend your arm, and just basic stuff so that you kind of have an idea of like what the dangers are, like what is going to go wrong. Just being aware of that sort of fundamental finishing position, being aware of that, and then just defensively sort of starting to look at this is probably more like the entirety of white belt now, but looking at more of like how the game's played, like what are the positions, where am I trying to get to and why, and how do they link together. So for example, understanding the guard and why you're passing it, and why the person playing guard's trying to get on top, and what the desired outcome is. So just how to play the game more or less, right? And then the biggest one I would say, a white belt to develop, it's really important, which is what I did with you for a long time, was defense. Just not getting submitted and then working your way to an escape. That's kind of like, you know what I mean? Don't get got and then find a way to improve your position. Even if it's incremental and takes the whole roll, if you can work your way back to a neutral position consistently, that's going to build the foundation for your ability to counter-attack. I liken it to sports like soccer, right? Like, if you're a goalie, you can't be scored on, it's a good place to start with, right? Because you're not going to lose because you can't get scored on. So then you're pretty much in a neutral zone now. Now you've got to get the ball down their end. And if you can do that, then you can start building offense, because you have your defense to fall back on. You're not worried about getting the ball turned over and getting scored on quickly. So just kind of like that. The game isn't won in one move. Even though I built my game like that, most people are going to build a game that's going to be a series of passing the ball incrementally towards the goal before they try and score. An example, getting out of a bad spot, working to your feet, passing the guard, going to knee ride, then going to mount, then moving for an arm or something, right? So it's incremental. And the thing that goes wrong, I think, with a lot of people is they get too focused on kicking goals. You know what I mean? Like, it starts with not getting scored on. So white belt, just like look after the net, like protect the net, and then find a way to start moving the ball backwards up the field. And then blue belt, fundamentals of everything, I would say. So like fundamental understanding of even offense to a degree. Like, you should start to really look at not making the classic mistakes with things like arm bars, chokes, like basic stuff. Like at white belt, you might be able to get an arm bar to work for sure, but at blue belt, you shouldn't be like crossing your legs with a lot of the arm bars because that's going to make them weaker, or you shouldn't be like crossing your ankles when you take the back control. Like by now, these things should be sort of weeded out, and from here you should start looking at a couple of good offensive things. So you should have your 1 or 2 things that work really well for you offensively. So you should have identified them. Like usually that kind of goes for everywhere. So you probably have 1 or 2 passes that work really well for you. You probably have a really good like couple of submissions, and maybe you're really good at a particular arm bar from guard, and you have a really good baseball choke. And then you have a couple of really good takedowns. Maybe you've got a pretty good single leg takedown, and you figured out a really good collar drag. But nothing really links together that well. It's usually just one move, and then stopping, then the next move, stopping, and then sometimes you might get like a 1-2. They might have figured out like I can do a hip bump, and then when they post their hand, I can do a kimura. They might have figured that out, right? But it's just that sort of thing. Purple belt's like I would say purple belt's like the equivalent of being a black belt in most other styles. You kind of know everything there is to know. More or less, you have a pretty good understanding of the whole entire game, right? Purple belt's kind of like chaining things together. So you should be able to seamlessly move as you would in a flow roll. You should be able to flow between positions. You shouldn't have to stop and think, where am I, what am I doing? You should be able to flow from like a sweep into a pass, and then they defend, they roll to their belly, and you jump on their back, and then they escape, and you go straight to knee right and straight to mount again, and then you go for an armbar, and they escape, and you go straight to a plata, and then you just keep flowing. It should be like that. That's what a purple belt, like a good purple belt should be able to just flow and move and not stop, right? And then for me, brown belt is revisiting fundamentals, so it's coming back to generally all the shit you're supposed to know that you don't know. You know what I mean? Like getting actually good at the basics, like hitting like guard arm bars, scissor sweeps, cross chokes on good level people. That's how you're a brown belt. If you're doing shit that you learned on day 1 to another brown belt, you're a brown belt. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, instead of catching all your little tricks and stuff that they maybe don't understand the game. Like, it's one thing to like play, let's say I'm a brown belt and I play a worm guard, I'm an old school brown belt, and I can sweep him. That's cool, but it's a little bit of a gimmick in the sense that he doesn't know what the fuck's going on, and he hasn't put time into evolving and adapting to that position. So that's why you're getting him, right? He doesn't understand what's happening. But to get him with the cross choke is going to require a level of mastery, because he understands what you're trying to do and how you're going to try and do it. So you have to systematically overcome the barriers you're going to put in place. And that's like the real chess, is being someone with that sort of thing, right? I should be able to pick a technique and go like, today I'm gonna armbar everyone from this position every chance I get. Or I should be able to go, I'm going to do a kimura every time I want, or a cross collar every time I want, and be able to, within reason, get that to happen. You know what I mean? That brown belt, that should be kind of like where you're going. It should be, if you get a sniff of something, you're finishing it, you know what I mean? And brown belt also is something I consider to be like a belt that requires, one thing I would look for to identify a brown belt is someone who doesn't give up no matter what the odds are. If that's where you really need to develop, somewhere between the end of purple and brown belt is probably going to be a level of resilience that far exceeds the average person, right? You're looking for like their ability to withstand really, really bad circumstances and come back and win a match, you know what I mean? Can they be down 20 points and find a way to win? Can they get badly injured and just make it happen? Or can they get thrown really hard and not mentally give up? Can they recover very quickly in their mind and keep fighting? And you know what I mean? Because jiu-jitsu, especially in a real fight, like your ability to absorb shock and then turn it around is very important. And the amount of matches I've seen get won by a guy who wasn't supposed to win is like much more than it should be. You know what I mean? Happens all the time. Guys up like 8 points, and then the other guy just doesn't accept it and finds a way to win. Happens all the time. And black belt's much harder to answer, I think, but I think black belt is almost like, it's like an informal recognized standard of excellence across every area, but it's not often upheld. Like black belts generally, a lot of the time when I see black belts now, they've gotten there mostly by time. They've been around a long time. It's probably the main key factor that's across everyone. And then, a general level of, ability, a high ability in lots of areas. But lots of black belts nowadays, I think, don't really actually have a broad game. They do have that depth that you get in purple belt, but across enough pillars where they can be super effective. And if you go into their game, then you're probably going to get, destroyed. But then to be a competitive black belt, a good competitive black belt, that's a whole other thing again, because now you're going against guys that are also considered very high level, and they're going to have tricks and stuff you're not used to, and you got to do that to them and blah blah blah. So I would say that's like the hierarchy is like people don't define that, but you've got like white, blue, purple, brown, black, then you've got competitive black belt, and then of course above that you have like the world level black belt. What do you remember from when you started?
I think I remember, like, I remember people more so than I remember like what was going on at that time. And so like I think the people that I started training with, a majority of them don't train anymore, at least to my knowledge. And the ones that do, they all train like pretty separately. So like different clubs and stuff, which I think happens pretty commonly. Like I think, different stages of life, people will like, move house or get a partner, and they'll, obviously again, probably move house and maybe move into state or something like that. So you don't see them at your club anymore, but maybe you might see them around the traps. I think seeing different people at comps now as well. Like I think when I first started, the competition scene was a bit funny, where it was like pretty, you didn't really speak to many people outside of your little clique or your little, like the club that you're part of.
Like territorial.
Very, yeah. It was kind of a weird, like, not hostile vibe, but it definitely wasn't friendly. It wasn't
tension in the air.
Very, 100%. And then now it's more like, there's people from Bunbury that I like speak to all the time. Every time I see them at SQT, you have like 10, 15, 20-minute chat with them, just to see how they've been going like through jiu-jitsu, and then obviously like chat about their life and shit and what's been going on. And like I don't think that was really like the done thing, at least like maybe 5-6 years ago. So I think that's probably one of the bigger things that sort of changed, at least for me anyway, or that I've observed over the years. Is yours sort of similar as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a product of there being more comps, because when you only fight once or twice a year, it's a big deal, and it's like very tense, and it's their club versus your club, and all this weird, like bullshit, pretty much. It's not real. They're just you in a parallel universe. That's all it is. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
So then you start seeing these people all the time at the comps, and you build a familiarity, and you realize, oh, this is just me. I'm just fighting myself. You know what I mean? So you end up just seeing them all the time at the comps, and then you fight against them a few times, and then you become friends, and that's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
That's the product I think of competing frequently. It's just like all that sort of shit gets kind of pushed away. The political part usually comes from the coaches, where they still have a weird like thing. They're either like from fear, usually they're worried about losing students, or they're worried about looking a certain way at comps, or their team not being considered the best or something like that. And it's probably a natural sort of thing to think, but I just don't really care to buy into any of it. Like I think as time goes on too, people just don't care. People just want to compete and train and cross train and meet people and have a good time doing jiu-jitsu because they love it. They don't want to. It's not like the Games of Rio in 1995. Like, you know what I mean? Perth's too small for that shit, man. Like, yeah. But it takes time for these things to break down.
I find that interesting. Hey, I had a pretty good conversation with John Will last week about, I guess, something pretty similar in terms of discussing like people at a really, really high level in jiu-jitsu. Like there's a relatively, I guess, common theme of maybe people like that are so specialized in one area of their life, so jiu-jitsu for example, that all the other areas of their life kind of get a little bit like neglected. So it's funny that people go to their jiu-jitsu coach for like some kind of weird life advice when maybe all that person is like really, really good at is jiu-jitsu, which is obviously a really awesome skill. Just a funny thing for people to kind of go like, oh, he's really good at jiu-jitsu, maybe he'll be able to help me with like X, Y, and Z, which is like got nothing to do with jiu-jitsu at all.
Oh, I think there's a strong correlation between being really good at jiu-jitsu and being really bad at business, for example. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't want to learn sales, they don't want to learn marketing, they don't want to understand how it all should go together. But it's funny because like people will see, like for example with me, right? They'll see me and they'll go like, that guy's a black belt, so he's mastered that thing in his life, and maybe you can help me with my taxes. It's like, I don't fucking know anything about that shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, there's no carryover here. Like, what do you, you know? But they just see you as an expert, and they constantly seeing other people treat you like an expert. And it's like, yeah, like, you know, I guess, right? Like, I guess I am, to a degree, in jiu-jitsu. But even then, like I said, I'm not an IBJJF world champion. I'm just a competitive black belt who's here locally, and I do okay, you know what I mean? But, so I'm not even really in the tippy top of my own lane, you know what I mean? I don't know why you think I would know anything about this other shit, you know? I can give you some life advice that's unrelated to jiu-jitsu, that things that I've gone through or maybe experienced in my life, and tell you how that turned out or whatever. Or someone like John, who is someone I would go to for advice on other things outside of jiu-jitsu, because he understands the power of leveraging information, and he puts time into other things other than jiu-jitsu as well. But a lot of people, I think, for whatever reason, they just hold their coach in such high esteem. They see him as like, almost like not a human. They see him as like some kind of like, I don't know, weird thing to...
Some messiah.
Yeah, and then the worst thing is when coaches get exposed to that for so long, they start to think that they are. You know what I mean? Yeah, and they start dishing out life advice and shit, you know? Like, yeah. I try to keep myself in check with a lot of that stuff, because like, sometimes I do have good advice about things. Well, I think it's good advice, right? But I try not to give it out, because then, like, who am I to tell you how to live your life, you know what I mean? Like, so I try and be careful with it, you know? Like, yeah. Whereas like, if you ask me about an armbar, I can probably show you how to fix that up, but you know what I mean? Like, yeah.